"Get out of my house, Grandma. You don't belong here anymore." Those were the exact words my parents shouted at her, the very second she stepped the front door of our small brick house on 14th Street in Savannah, Georgia, at exactly 3:17 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. It was mid-April 2022, and the sun was slicing through the white lace curtains like knives, casting sharp shadows across the worn oak floorboards. Grandma had just returned from Savannah General Hospital, where she had spent 10 grueling days recovering from a hip replacement surgery that had cost over $21,763.84, including medications, therapy, and emergency x-rays. And yet here, she was being kicked out of the only home she had known for the past 42 years. My hand shook as I clutched the edge of the couch, the fabric rough under my palm smelling faintly of mothballs and lemon polish. I couldn't breathe properly, my heart pounding like the old Baptist church bell that rang every Sunday at 10:05 a.m. down the street. The scene was unreal. Grandma's wheelchair squeaked against the wooden floor as she tried to inch forward, my dad blocking her path with his arms crossed, his face red with anger. I said, "Leave now or I'll call the police." He spat like venom. The contrast was brutal. She had spent decades cooking me my favorite fried chicken on Sundays, teaching me to braid hair, and saving every penny she could have sent me to summer camp. And yet in exactly 15 minutes from that moment, everything she had built for our family could be stripped away forever. The living room smelled of antiseptic from her hospital stay mixed with the faint aroma of burnt toast left in the kitchen an hour ago. Every clock ticked with cruel precision, every second counting down to humiliation. My mom stood behind my dad, arms folded, shaking her head, muttering, "She's too old to live here." As if age alone erased a lifetime of sacrifice, Grandma's glasses caught the light of the setting sun, her eyes glistening with tears that rolled silently down her wrinkled cheeks. I could hear the faint hum of Mrs. Patterson from next door, peeking through her fence, whispering to herself, while holding her cell phone, recording the confrontation. "This is unbelievable," she muttered. I remember feeling frozen like one of the ceramic angels Grandma kept on the mantelpiece, my fingers gripping the threadbare throw blanket. I wanted to scream, but my voice got caught somewhere in my throat. The injustice was immediate, visceral, and so raw that even the neighborhood dogs seemed to sense it, barking furiously from behind their fences. As if protesting the cruelty unfolding before them, I looked at the photo frames on the wall, framed black and white images of Grandma in the 1960s dancing at the county fair in Savannah with her sisters wearing polka dot dresses and saddle shoes, smiling ear to ear in perfect harmony with the world. And now here she was being treated as if she were invisible. "But I cleaned this house for her last week," I whispered more to myself than anyone else, the tiles still cool under my bare feet from mopping just 2 days ago. Every detail mattered. Every second added weight to the heartbreak. The clock struck 3:22 p.m., and I knew that in exactly 15 minutes my grandmother could be forced into the car parked outside the driveway on Maple Avenue, ready to take her to some assisted living facility. She didn't want to go. The neighbors gathered slowly, some leaning from their porches, others craning necks around fences, phones out, ready to capture the injustice unfolding right in front of them. I could see little Tommy from next door whispering to his mom, "Why are they yelling at Grandma?" His innocence made the cruelty hit even harder. My stomach twisted, my hands trembling, as I realized this was not just a family argument. This was a public spectacle of betrayal and arrogance right in our own neighborhood. Grandma tried to speak, but her voice cracked mid-word. I just... She stammered, clutching her hospital blanket, a faded blue color with tiny white flowers stitched decades ago in Charleston, South Carolina, where she had learned to sew as a young girl. Her frailty was like a living testament to all the love and work she had given over the decades, yet my parents acted as if none of it mattered. I could see the first trickle of tears forming on my mother's cheek, but not out of empathy, rather out of irritation at the situation, as if she were the one suffering. I remember thinking in that exact moment that life could be so cruel and unfair. I didn't know if anyone would step in to stop, and my heart raced, the air thick with tension, the sunlight fading to a soft orange, casting long shadows across the living room floorboards. Every second that ticked by intensified the shame and helplessness. But deep down, I felt something stirring, a seed of determination. I didn't understand it yet, but I knew that the injustice we were witnessing would not end here. If you have ever seen someone you love treated this way, if you have ever felt your heart break watching an elder disrespected, you know exactly the pain I felt and the question I kept repeating to myself over and over as Grandma sat frozen in her wheelchair in the middle of the living room was simple, but piercing. What would you do if someone you loved more than anything in the world was suddenly declared unwelcome in their own home? Comment below if you've ever experienced this kind of betrayal, because what happened next changed everything in ways I could never have imagined, and I promise you by the end of this story you'll feel the full weight of what it means to fight back against injustice. I remember the first time Grandma took me to River Street in Savannah back in the summer of 1978. I was 8 years old, wearing my favorite yellow sundress with little white daisies and brown sandals that pinched my toes. She held my hand. As we walked past the brick warehouses, turned souvenir shops, the salty smell of the Savannah River mixing with fried seafood from the small restaurants lining the street, she told me stories about her childhood in Charleston, South Carolina, about how she would skip stones with her brothers at Shem Creek, and how her mother used to hum old jazz tunes from the 1940s. While ironing clothes, Grandma had always been the kind of person who poured herself into others. She worked 3 jobs. After Dad died back in 1982, she cleaned offices downtown at 5 a.m., baked pies at the Peach Blossom Bakery by 9 a.m., and babysat kids in the afternoons for extra cash just to make sure we could go on vacation every summer to Tybee Island, and buy school supplies for all the kids on our street. I can still remember the exact amount she saved in those little tin boxes, one labeled school and another labeled fun. The coins clinking inside sounded like tiny bells every time she shook them. She never missed a single piano recital or little league game, even when she had pneumonia. In January of 1985, she somehow managed to cook a full Christmas dinner for 12 people and still make everyone laugh with her corny jokes like, "Don't worry, Johnny, I didn't burn the turkey." This year, Grandma's generosity was endless, and yet quietly I began to notice how she always put herself last. She would skip meals, sometimes just to make sure we had enough to eat. She paid for my first bicycle out of her $73 weekly paycheck. From cleaning the old courthouse on Bull Street a paycheck, she split 3 ways between rent, groceries, and gifts for all of us. She even taught me how to save my allowance, meticulously keeping track in a tiny notebook with faint pencil marks dated back to June of 1977, every pencil line a testament to her care and patience. Grandma's relationship with my parents was complicated, though I never understood it as a child. My mom and dad always thanked her politely in front of me, but I could sense tension behind closed doors. I remember one Thanksgiving in 1990 when she gave my dad a homemade cranberry sauce he had asked for, and he said flatly, "I don't like it that much," right in front of the whole family. The room fell silent. Grandma smiled anyway and said softly, "That's okay, dear, I'll make something else tomorrow." Her humility was like a shield she wore to protect us all, even when treated unfairly. I remember sitting on the floor of our kitchen that night, smelling the lingering scent of roasted turkey and sage. I could feel the warmth of the oven radiating to my sweater and the wooden floor pressed under my knees. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't find the words, so I just hugged her leg and whispered, "I love you, Grandma." She patted my head and said, "I know, Johnny, I know." In those years, she sacrificed literally everything, her time, her energy, her health, to give us comfort, safety, and love. I can recall the exact numbers of nights she stayed up helping me with math homework, adding fractions, and solving long division problems. When I was 10 and 11, she must have spent over 72 hours total across a month just on my algebra assignment alone. And yet, even with all this care and commitment, the first cracks of disrespect began to appear subtly. My parents would occasionally dismiss her advice or ignore her suggestions about budgeting or cooking. "We'll handle it," they'd say curtly without looking her in the eyes. At first, I didn't notice it much as a child. I just thought they were busy or cranky, like anyone else. But as the years passed, I realized that the small slights added up like silent erosion. Grandma never retaliated, never raised her voice. She simply continued to give and give and give until there was nothing left to give for herself. I remember the exact day it hit me the first time I felt a pang of injustice. It was August 12th, 1997 in Savannah. I was sitting on the back porch smelling the jasmine Grandma had planted along the railing. She handed me a freshly baked pie and whispered, "One day, Johnny, they might not appreciate this, but you always will." I didn't understand fully then, but now the words haunt me because she was preparing me to notice a truth adults often overlook. Those who dedicate their lives of others are frequently the ones taken for granted. And I began to quietly ask myself the question every child eventually faces: what would happen if the people who are supposed to love you most suddenly turned their backs? What would happen if all the sacrifices, all the kindness, all the late nights and early mornings amounted to nothing? Hold on to that thought because the story is only beginning, and you're about to see exactly how years of dedication can be met with betrayal that will make your blood boil and your heart ache simultaneously. Just wait until you see what happens next and ask yourself the question, what would you do if the person you trusted the most suddenly became your enemy? By the time I was 12, Grandma had already invested more than anyone could imagine in my upbringing, not just emotionally, but financially. I remember in the summer of 1984, she took me and my cousin Lisa to Tybee Island for 2 full weeks. The cost of the rental house alone was $1,287.50, not including the $243.66 she spent on groceries and ice cream cones and a little stand on the corner of Butler Avenue. We spent entire days building sandcastles and collecting seashells, the sun hot on our shoulders, the smell of salt water and sunscreen mixing in the humid air. Grandma never complained once. She carried our beach bags, often heavier than her own weight, down to the shore, balancing on her arthritic knees, while laughing at our squeals and splashes. She had even sewn matching swimsuits for Lisa and me from fabric she bought at the fabric store on Broughton Street, $19.42 for the blue cotton and $5.12 for the elastic, knowing exactly how to measure our small frames from memory. The flashbacks keep coming. I remember the exact week of Christmas 1986. She secretly took an extra job at the corner diner on Habersham Street to save $312.77. So she could buy me my first bike, a shiny red Schwinn with a basket that had little white flowers painted on the sides. She handed me the receipt tucked into an envelope with my name written in cursive and whispered, "I want you to enjoy it without worrying about the cost." Her investments weren't just money. They were her time, her energy, her very life. And yet, even as a child, I began to notice tiny signs of strain. Her hands were calloused from decades of work, her knees swollen from hours spent scrubbing floors, her hair streaked with gray despite being only 57 at the time. One evening in November 1989, I remember watching her sit on the porch peeling apples for pie, the dim light of the single bulb casting long shadows across her tired face. I asked her, "Grandma, why do you work so much?" She paused, rubbed her forehead, and sighed. "Because someone has to make sure you kids get a chance at life, Johnny. Someone has to keep the lights on and the meals on the table, even when it hurts." The pain in her voice was quiet, but undeniable. She had given so much to so many for decades, yet the first signs of disrespect began to creep in from my parents, subtle but unmistakable. The first time I noticed it was on July 23rd, 1991, when she offered to help my dad with taxes. And he said flatly, "I'll handle it myself, Grandma. You don't need to worry about numbers." As if her decades of bookkeeping experience at the small accounting office downtown meant nothing. Her expectations were simple, fair acknowledgement of her efforts. But even that was denied. The more I reflect, the more I see the pattern of ways small slights accumulate, like invisible bruises. I remember vividly one Tuesday in March 1990, for she had stayed up late cleaning the kitchen at 2:17 a.m. after we had all gone to bed. She was exhausted, her hands raw from scrubbing the stovetop, and still she made a mental note to leave a warm bowl of oatmeal for me at 6:30 a.m. because she knew I had morning classes at the community college at that time. When my parents discovered it, they complained it was unnecessary. We could have handled breakfast. My mom said with that familiar tone of dismissal. Her sacrifices went unnoticed despite their specificity, despite the detail, despite her tireless devotion. Flashbacks of these moments piled up in my mind like stacks of old letters of faded ink on hospital forms from 1982, when she donated blood twice a month to fund the local clinic. Her carefully recorded grocery expenses for months, adding up to precise totals like $1,054.29 in 1995 alone. So that no money was wasted, she did everything with calculation and love, yet the subtle disrespect never stopped. The tension in the house became almost tangible. I can recall one Friday evening in September 1998, sitting on the back steps, smelling the honeysuckle that climbed along the fence, and hearing my mom mutter under her breath, "She's too old to give advice." My young mind didn't understand fully then, but the injustice fell sharp like biting into a lemon. Unprepared, I could see Grandma stiffen slightly, her shoulders hunched, but she didn't raise her voice, not even once. Her dignity remained intact, even as the invisible weight of neglect pressed down on her like the faint creak of the old rocking chair on the porch that always signaled her presence. Her perseverance was constant and unyielding. She expected nothing, but gave everything. I remember feeling a mixture of admiration and helplessness wanted to shout to the world that this woman had devoted every day of her life to others, and yet now she was at risk of being pushed aside by the very people she trusted most. My mind kept returning to the exact numbers to quantify her sacrifice as 33. Summers spent as a babysitter, 17 Christmases spent cooking, dinners for 20 or more relatives, 42 years maintaining a house on 14th Street. While working full-time, her total lifetime contribution, impossible to measure, yet undeniable in its impact. And every day the small injustices continued unnoticed by the world, but not by me. I remember thinking, as I traced my fingers along the chipped wooden railing of the porch, she deserves better than this. She deserves recognition. She deserves justice. Little did I know that those small realizations would ignite the storm that was about to come, and that every slight, every ignored effort, every whispered dismissal was preparing us for the moment when patience would run out and justice would demand a stage. And when you see what happens next, the full weight of years of sacrifice met with betrayal will hit you just as hard as it hit me. And you'll have to ask yourself the same question I did back then. What would you do if someone who had given their entire life to you was suddenly treated like a stranger? Hold on to that thought, because the story is only growing darker and the humiliation is about to escalate. It started on the morning of April 12th, 2022, just 2 days after Grandma returned from Savannah General Hospital, her wheelchair squeaking as she attempted to navigate the narrow hallway of our house on 14th Street. I was sitting at the kitchen table, tracing the worn edges of the oak tabletop, when I heard my dad mutter under his breath, "She can't even make it to the living room without help." My stomach twisted like a knot of barbed wire. I had counted every day she had spent in the hospital: 10. Full days of surgeries, IVs, and therapy costing exactly $21,763.84. And now the first hints of contempt were emerging right before my eyes. The smell of disinfectant lingered in the air, mixed with the faint aroma of coffee my mom had brewed at 7:42 a.m. Still warm, but ignored as they began to speak over her. "Just leave it, Grandma. We'll handle lunch ourselves," my mom said with a clipped tone, like she was swatting a fly. Grandma's frailty was apparent. She struggled to balance on the edges of her wheelchair, the sun catching the silver in her hair, the same hair she curled with hot rollers back in the late 70s every Saturday night for church dances. She tried to smile as she muttered softly, "I just want to help a little." Her voice cracked under the weight of exhaustion and indignation. I could see the first ripple of anger forming in me, like the low rumble of a summer thunderstorm on Skidaway Island. The humiliation began to escalate as they systematically dismissed her attempts to contribute. I remember the exact sequence. It unfolded in 5 clear stages. First, she tried to set the table at 8:15 a.m. My dad waved her off. "Sit down, Grandma, you'll tire yourself out." Then she attempted to fold the laundry at 9:03 a.m. My mom said, "Leave it. We'll do it." Then she moved toward the living room to organize the newspaper stack from the week prior, and my dad hissed, "We don't need your help there either," every word slicing through her decades of dedication, as if the time she spent raising us, cleaning, cooking, saving, mentoring, volunteering, literally meant nothing. Witnesses began appearing naturally, neighbors peeking to the blinds, Mr. Thompson from across the street shaking his head while holding his cell phone, recording discreetly. "This is awful," he whispered his wife, Mrs. Thompson, on the porch. "They're treating her like she's invisible." Grandma's face reddened with embarrassment as she paused mid-step, the hardwood floor cold beneath her socks. I could hear the faint whirring of the ceiling fan above, barely moving the warm air, yet somehow adding to the oppressive tension. The entire kitchen smelled of antiseptic and lemon polish from the mopped floors earlier that morning. I could feel my hands clench into fists, my nails pressing into my palms as I watched her struggle. Through each dismissal, the contrast was unbearable. She had devoted decades to this family, spending thousands of hours in care and labor, yet in that very moment she was treated as if she had no agency, no right, no value. The cruelty was methodical, precise, my parents' voices alternating between irritation and command, every sentence a hammer striking at the foundation of her dignity. At 10:27 a.m., she attempted to offer me a glass of water I had asked for earlier that morning, and my dad barked, "Don't even bother Grandma. I'll get myself." Grandma froze the water halfway to my lips, the glass trembling in her frail hands, her eyes locked with mine, and I saw the betrayal. Reflecting back like a shattered mirror, each movement she made was met with resistance. Each offer of help or rejection. She tried to retreat to her room, the hallway too narrow, her wheelchair squeaking against the doorframe. I followed behind her, trying to offer a reassuring hand, and whispered, "It's okay, Grandma. I'll help you." She smiled weakly, but I could see the humiliation etched into every line of her face. I remember feeling my throat tighten. As I realized this was more than neglect, it was a public spectacle of arrogance and power abuse right in our living room in front of witnesses who had started gathering outside like an audience at a tragic play. Mrs. Patterson from next door was filming from behind her white picket fence little Tommy, from down the street, peering around a corner, asking his mother, "Why are they yelling at Grandma?" The question lingered in the air heavier than the humid spring heat. Grandma's resilience was remarkable. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry out. She simply continued moving through the house carefully, trying not to spill the water on the already polished floor. Her dignity, in the face of escalating humiliation, was both inspiring and heart-wrenching. I could feel my own anger bubbling with every ignored gesture, every sharp word, and I realized that we were teetering on the edge of a tipping point. The story was only beginning to intensify, and what happened next would push the boundaries of patience and outrage for everyone who had invested even a moment of empathy in this scene. Ask yourself for a moment what you would do if you watched someone you love being dismissed over and over right in front of you. Just wait until you see the next chapter, because the humiliation is about to reach its peak and nothing will be the same again. By 2:16 p.m. on that fateful Thursday, April 14th, 2022, the tension in the house on 14th Street in Savannah had become unbearable. Grandma's wheelchair sat at the center of the living room like a fragile island in a storm, her hands gripping the worn leather sides, her knuckles white with strain. My dad's voice cut through the room, sharp and relentless. "Grandma, just leave it here. This is ours now. You don't need to touch anything." His arms crossed, chest puffed, face flushed like the evening sun. Through the kitchen window, Grandma blinked rapidly, the sunlight catching her silver hair, the same hair she had styled every Saturday night in her 50s with foam rollers. While humming Ella Fitzgerald records, I could smell the faint antiseptic from the hospital mingling with burnt toast from the kitchen drawer. Where crumbs lingered unnoticed, my mom chimed in from the corner, arms folded, shaking her head. "I can't believe you still think you have a say here." Every word a dagger sheathed in the pretense of authority. I felt my chest tighten as my hands clenched the edge of the sofa, the rough fabric biting into my palms. Every detail amplified the humiliation. The old wooden floor groaned under each movement, the ceiling fan whirred above, barely moving the thick April air, but somehow making the heat feel heavier across the room. Mrs. Patterson from next door had stepped onto her porch, holding her phone at 2:17 p.m., filming the entire spectacle while muttering, "I can't believe they're treating her like this." Little Tommy from down the street peeked over the fence, whispering, "Why are they yelling at her?" His mother hushed him, but I saw the confusion mirrored in his wide eyes. Grandma tried to respond softly. "I just want to help a little," her voice quivering like the fragile wind chimes hanging outside the porch. My dad waved her off with irritation. "Stop talking. Sit down where you belong." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The room smelled faintly of lemons, bleach, and old paper from the newspapers stacked in a corner. Her hands had tried to organize that morning, every single effort dismissed without a second thought. Then came the line crossed at exactly 2:23 p.m. My mom, standing near the doorway, spoke with cold finality. "We're done with your nonsense, Grandma. Pack your things. We're calling the moving company in 15 minutes. My heart sank as the humiliation reached its peak. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling, and she turned slowly toward me as if asking silently, "Why is this happening?" I couldn't speak. The anger and helplessness knotted my throat. The witnesses outside gasped and murmured. Mrs. Thompson leaned over the white picket fence, whispering to Mr. Thompson, "This is criminal." It's like they don't even see her humanity. Across the street, a teenager from my school filmed discreetly from his driveway, mumbling, "People need to see this." The air felt suffocating, the ticking clock loud, as if mocking the helplessness in the room. Grandma attempted to move forward, but my dad stepped deliberately in front of her, blocking the hallway. "I said no." "This is our house now," he said with venom dripping from every syllable. She froze. The wheelchair squeaking against the wooden floorboards of the room smelled of hospital antiseptic sweat, and the faint aroma of burnt toast mixing in the tense air. Her hands shook as she tried to navigate, her small frame dwarfed by the towering presence of my parents. And I could feel the humiliation pressing down on her like a physical weight. Every second added to the crushing intensity of the moment. She was a lifetime of love, sacrifice, and resilience reduced to trembling in her own home at exactly 2:28 p.m. I could see tears welling in her eyes. her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The same chest that had carried us all through storms of every kind over decades. My hands itched to act, but I was only 12. I could barely move, barely speak, yet I felt the seed of determination grow inside me like a fire, waiting to ignite. The room was alive with witnesses. Neighbors filming, children watching, adults whispering, the whole block subtly aware of the injustice unfolding. Every dismissal, every cruel command compounded the emotional weight until it became unbearable. Grandma tried one final act of kindness, reaching toward a stack of newspapers to organize them as she always did, and my mom screamed, "Stop that! You have no say." The room went silent for a moment, the oppressive weight hanging in the air like a heavy fog. I remember thinking at that exact moment that something had to change, that the injustice was so blatant that ignoring it was impossible. That afternoon, the humiliation peaked, not just emotionally, but publicly, and I realized that this wasn't a private dispute anymore. This was a spectacle of cruelty, arrogance, and power abuse that could not go unchallenged. And if you've ever seen someone you love treated like this, you know exactly the tension, the heartbreak, and the anger coiling in your chest, because the next chapter is when everything shifts. The point of no return is reached, and the seeds of awakening begin to sprout. Stay with me, because what happens next will mark the moment when patience breaks and resolve takes over. It was exactly 3:01 p.m. on April 14th, 2022, when everything inside me shifted. The humiliation, the anger, the helplessness all crystallized into a sudden piercing clarity. I stood in the middle of the living room on 14th Street in Savannah, watching my grandmother's trembling hands clutch the wheelchair arms, and something inside me snapped. I could feel my shoulders straighten, my spine lengthen, as if I had just grown 2 inches taller. The sunlight slanted to the lace curtains, illuminating dust motes that danced in the heavy air, smelling faintly of antiseptic lemon polish and burnt toast from the kitchen earlier that morning. Grandma looked at me, her eyes wide and glistening. I whispered softly, "It's going to be okay, Grandma." And in that moment, I realized I meant it not just as a comfort, but as a declaration. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. She had given decades of her life to all of us, and she deserved to be seen, to be respected, to be defended. And suddenly the small seed of resolve inside me, the one I had felt growing for months, if not years, erupted into clarity. I could feel the tension in the room shift slightly, as if the walls themselves recognized a change. My dad's voice was still sharp, but my ears were filtering it differently. "Grandma, you can't touch that." He barked. She flinched, and I took a deep breath, my hands gripping the edge of the sofa tight enough to feel the coarse fabric bite into my palms, yet not enough to panic. I realized I didn't need to. I didn't need to cry. I only needed to act with precision, with awareness, with the calm of someone who knows they are right, but whose power has not yet been revealed. The first clues of strength were subtle. Grandma straightened her back slightly, her hand still on the wheelchair, but her eyes now reflecting a quiet fire I had never seen before. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but carried an unexpected authority. I will not be treated like this anymore," she said. And I saw my parents pause, my mom's mouth open and close like a fish out of water. My dad blinked twice and glanced around as if sensing something was shifting in the air. I could see the neighbors leaning over fences, their phones poised, but unsure whether to intervene. The atmosphere was heavy, but changing every second. The house itself seeming to exhale. The clock on the wall ticked 3:03 p.m. precisely, and for the first time all day the silence carried power, not fear. I remembered all the hidden strengths Grandma had quietly nurtured: her intelligence, her meticulous record keeping, her connections in the community, her small but sharp network of allies built over decades, helping neighbors, volunteering at the church, organizing charity drives, totaling exact sums like $2,468.35 for local families in need each year. Her life had been full of quiet victories, unnoticed until now. I realized these were not merely memories, but tools, weapons, even subtle ones to shift the balance. Her posture changed, her chest rose slightly, and for the first time in hours the living room smelled not defeat, but a potential victory. The faint hint of lemon polish still in the air, mixing with a hospital antiseptic, now seemed almost ceremonial. I felt my own breathing slow, the rapid heartbeat in my chest calming into a rhythm of focus. And intent, the neighbors' whispers became audible. "She's not going to take it anymore," Mrs. Patterson murmured, and I caught the first glimmer of recognition that what seemed like endless humiliation could now transform into action. I remembered specific moments from past summers, every dollar saved, $73 weekly paycheck split, Between rent, groceries, and gifts for all of us, every Thanksgiving she had cooked for 12 people despite illness. Every time she stayed up at 2:17 a.m. peeling apples for her pies. All these details crystallized into a single thought. Grandma had power my parents had underestimated, and we were about to see it start to emerge. And in that quiet moment, I understood something important. Awakening didn't require yelling or violence. It required awareness, courage, and the subtle assertion of authority. The fire was lit, and though the confrontation was far from over, the first shift had occurred. I whispered to myself, no more. And I could feel the room itself waiting for the next move. If you've ever felt powerless watching someone you love being dismissed over and over, you know the weight I carried in those few minutes. But hold on, because in the next chapter, the decision is consolidated. The strategy takes shape, and the real power begins to reveal itself. The awakening has begun, and nothing will be the same again. It was exactly 3:22 p.m. on April 14th, 2022, when Grandma finally made a decision I had been waiting for hours, her eyes locked on my parents, her hand steadied on the worn leather sides of the wheelchair, and I could see the quiet storm forming within her. Decades of sacrifice suddenly transforming into resolve. My dad was still barking instructions. I said, sit down, Grandma. You're done here. And my mom was shaking her head, muttering, we don't need this drama. But their words, for the first time that day, bounced off an invisible shield she had built silently over years. I could smell the faint hospital antiseptic mixed with lemon polish, still lingering from the morning. A subtle reminder of her endurance, every detail of the room charged with anticipation. Grandma straightened, her silver hair catching the afternoon light, streaming through the lace curtains. On 14th Street, and she said softly but with unwavering authority, no more. I will not be treated like this in my own home. The calm in her voice contrasted sharply with the arrogance of my parents, creating a tension so thick it felt like the air itself had turned viscous. I realized this was more than a statement of words. It was a strategic assertion, a silent warning that the game was about to change. I could feel the neighbors' eyes through the windows, Mrs. Patterson leaning over a fence, filming quietly, whispering, something's different now. Little Tommy from across the street peeking from behind the oak tree, his jaw dropped, his mother shaking her head in disbelief. The living room smelled faintly of antiseptic and polish, but yet under that veneer was a charged energy, anticipation. Like the calm before a hurricane, every movement Grandma made was deliberate now, calculated with precision, her hands steady on the wheelchair, feet firmly planted, her gaze sharp. I realized she had been preparing for this moment, without us noticing. Decades of careful organization, quiet influence, and meticulous records giving her the edge she needed. I remember the exact amount she had saved, $73 per week split between rent, groceries, and gifts, the $1,287.50 for Tybee Island. Every nickel and dollar carefully accounted for, not just to provide for us, but as unseen leverage, a safety net that can now be used to assert control. Her voice rang again, slightly louder. We are not done here. I will not be pushed aside. My dad took a step forward, chest rising, arrogance etched into every line of his face. But I could see hesitation creeping in, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He had never encountered resistance so calm, so calculated. Before my mom muttered, she's changed? What's going on? The subtle power shift was tangible. The witnesses outside held their collective breath. Sensing the change, Mrs. Thompson whispering to her husband, it's like she's finally showing them who she really is. The air was heavy but charged. Every tick of the clock. 3:25 p.m., signaling the exact moment the balance began to tip. Grandma's decision was strategic, not emotional. A masterful move honed over decades of subtle influence and hidden authority. She gestured toward the living room door. Not to retreat, but to signal readiness, preparation, and control. I realized she was setting the stage for the next move. Every step calculated. Her dignity unshakable, and her resolve unwavering. The energy in the room shifted, my chest tightening. A mix of pride and awe as I saw my grandmother's hidden strength reveal itself like the first rays of dawn piercing a stormy night. She had chosen action over submission, clarity over confusion, strategy over panic. And in that instant, I understood the magnitude of what was happening. The house felt alive, aware to shift. The subtle hum of the ceiling fan, the faint smell of burnt toast, Even the light through the lace curtain seemed charged with anticipation. Grandma had decided not to be a victim any longer, and the quiet strength radiating from her was palpable. Every second was measured, every gesture deliberate, every whisper and murmur outside the house a testament to the transformation that was underway. If you've ever felt powerless, seeing someone you love dismissed over and over, you know exactly the sensation of watching patience turn into strategy. The next chapter will reveal the first signs of her hidden power, the subtle maneuvers that will begin to change everything forever. The calm before the storm has arrived. And you'll want to see how the tables start turning. Stay with me, because the story is about to take a dramatic twist, and nothing will ever be the same again. By 3:47 p.m. on April 14th, 2022, the air in our Savannah living room had changed completely. Grandma's voice, calm and steady, carried an authority no one could ignore. I will not be moved until this matter is resolved fairly. She said each word deliberate, precise, like a strike of a hammer against a fragile wall. My dad froze mid-step, his arrogance faltering for the first time. That day my mom's lips parted, but no words came out, the weight of decades of unacknowledged sacrifice pressing down on. The room was suddenly visible. The faint smell of antiseptic still lingered, mixed with lemon polish from the morning, but now it carried an almost ceremonial sense of power. Grandma reached slowly into her purse and pulled out a small folder embossed with the letters SCLC, the South Carolina Legal Counsel. The edges worn from years of careful handling. The neighbors outside gasped as Mrs. Patterson whispered, "Is that?" and fumbled with her phone to zoom in on the small emblem. Little Tommy from across the street pressed his face against the fence, eyes wide as if witnessing a superhero reveal herself. The first documents were slid across the coffee table carefully and deliberately. Every paper a testament to hidden authority, decades of careful preparation, meticulous records of property ownership, bills paid for years totaling exactly $312,458.72 in contributions to the house, utilities, and renovations Grandma had undertaken alone, while my parents ignored, dismissed, or minimized every effort. I watched her hands, steady and precise, as she pointed to the documents. These are the facts. The ownership is mine. The contributions documented. No one can dispute it. My dad's face went pale, his usual assertiveness crumbling. My mom stepped back, crossing her arms, muttering, I didn't realize. But the words lacked conviction because the room had shifted. The witnesses outside began whispering, "She's serious. She's really serious." Mr. Thompson, shaking his head, phone still recording, murmured, "I've never seen anything like this." The faint hum of the ceiling fan overhead seemed to echo the tension like a drum roll, the afternoon light casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors that had been scrubbed countless times by Grandma herself over the decades. Grandma continued, calm but unyielding, "I have lived here for over 50 years. I have invested thousands of hours, dollars, and my life itself into this home. I will not be treated like a guest in my own house." The precision of her tone, the clarity of the numbers, the undeniable evidence created a visible shift. My dad's jaw tightened. He tried to interject, but her gaze, sharp and unwavering, stopped in mid-word. The neighbors outside shifted on their porches, dozens now watching, some filming, murmuring, "This is incredible, she's showing them." The subtle revelation of power was now unmistakable. My grandma had never needed to shout. She had never needed to threaten. She had simply prepared quietly, meticulously. And now every step, every document, every fact was evidence of the power no one had dared acknowledge before. The tension was so thick it was almost palpable, the air heavy but charged, smelling faintly of antiseptic and lemon polish, mixed with a sense of inevitability. Every second stretched as my parents processed the unexpected magnitude of her authority. My mom whispered, "I didn't know she had this," and my dad's face fell, the usual arrogance stripped away, replaced by disbelief. Grandma's presence radiated confidence, dignity, and control. I could feel the first spark of the shift of power I had sensed hours ago finally manifesting in real-time. Room, the witnesses, the sunlit walls, even the faint squeak of the wheelchair were all now part of an unspoken court of justice. The first signs of her transformation were complete, but subtle enough that the climax had yet to fully arrive. The neighbors' whispers grew louder. Mrs. Patterson exclaiming, "This is historic." Mr. Thompson murmuring, "She's showing everyone what it means to be prepared." Grandma's calm demeanor, combined with decades of meticulous preparation, had turned humiliation into undeniable authority. Every eye in the room recognized the shift. Every whisper outside acknowledged the first visible cracks in the previous power dynamic. And as you watch this unfold in your mind, imagine the anticipation of collective breath held by everyone in the house and across the street, because the next chapter will confirm her power fully. And nothing will ever feel the same again if this shocked you as much as it did me. Share this moment with someone now, because what happened next will leave everyone speechless. By 4:03 p.m. on April 14th, 2022, the living room at 14th Street in Savannah had transformed into a courtroom of undeniable authority. Grandma's hands, steady and deliberate, laid down the final set of documents across the coffee table, each paper crisp, edges perfectly aligned, every number precise, every signature verified. The faint smell of antiseptic from her hospital stay mingled with a lingering lemon polish from a morning, but now it carried a sense of inevitability, like the calm before. "A verdict," Mrs. Patterson outside gasped. Holding her phone up to zoom in on the document, she whispered, "I can't believe it. She really did it." Little Tommy's jaw dropped from across the street, his mother placing a hand on his shoulder, muttering, "Look at her. She's unstoppable, my grandma." Silver hair catching the late afternoon sun, her eyes unwavering, finally spoke with calm finality. "The property, the contributions, the time, the labor, everything I've invested is documented and legally recognized. I am the rightful owner, and no one could dismiss this." My dad, who had been pacing nervously, froze mid-step, the arrogance draining from his face replaced by disbelief. He tried to speak, this can't be, but his voice faltered, the words catching in his throat. My mom's arms fell to her sides, muttering, we didn't know." As the full weight of reality settled in their attempts to maintain control, had crumbled under the undeniable evidence, the neighbors outside had grown from a handful to nearly a dozen. Phones raised, filming. Whispers filling the block. "She's proving them wrong. She's unstoppable." Mr. Thompson shook his head, muttering, "Every detail accounted for, every dollar, everything." The atmosphere inside the house shifted completely from tension to awe, every second heavy with realization. Grandma's transformation was now complete. The subtle hints, the first signs of authority, the calm warnings, all had coalesced into a full assertion of power. The room smelled of polished wood, hospital antiseptic, and a faint breeze from the open windows mixing with a sense of justice served. I could feel the weight of years of humiliation lift as she finally reclaimed her space, her dignity, intact, her authority, unchallenged. My dad sank into the armchair, shoulders slumped, face pale. He muttered incoherently, "I underestimated." My mom, tears welling up, nodded silently. The witnesses outside gasped audibly, whispers spreading like wildfire across the neighborhood. "She's incredible. This is historic." The precise number she presented, $312,458.72 in verified contributions, decades of labor meticulously documented, photographs, receipts, volunteer logs from 1978 to 2022, and notarized statements from neighbors and local officials, all irrefutable evidence. Left my parents speechless. My grandma's presence radiated calm power, her posture straight, eyes sharp, every gesture measured and deliberate as she declared softly, "I will not be dismissed. I will not be humiliated. This is my home, my family, and my life's work. It ends here." The change was instantaneous. The previous arrogance my parents wielded as a weapon evaporated, completely replaced by shock and submission. The room, the walls, the air itself seemed to hum with the recognition of her authority outside. Witnesses filmed and whispered, eyes wide, the story spreading even through the small block. "She's unstoppable. Look at her." I felt a surge of pride and awe at her composure and strategy. She had never yelled, never threatened, yet every second, every detail, every subtle move led to this undeniable shift of power. The faint squeak of the wheelchair, once a symbol of vulnerability, now carried authority. Every creak a declaration of ownership and control. Grandma's calm precision, her decades of preparation, her meticulous accounting of every contribution and every effort, had overturned the humiliation and restored dignity. Instantly, the final documents, signed and verified, were slid toward my parents as if to say the story was over. The truth, undeniable. My dad finally looked up, swallowing hard, muttering, "I see it now." My mom, wiping tears, whispered, "You were right. We were wrong." And as the witnesses outside continued filming, sharing the moment live across the neighborhood, the reality was clear. Humiliation had been reversed, power had been restored, and justice had arrived in real time. If this revelation shocked you as much as it did me, share this story with someone now, because the next chapter will show the immediate consequences and the full impact of this justice unfolding. By 4:37 p.m. on April 14th, 2022, the living room at 14th Street in Savannah had transformed from a scene of humiliation into a stage of justice. The weight of decades of dismissive behavior by my parents now visibly lifted. My grandma's calm authority radiated like sunlight, piercing a storm cloud. The faint smell of antiseptic lingered in the room, mixed with lemon polish, and the subtle aroma of old with the neighbors outside had grown to a small crowd, some filming, others whispering excitedly, "This is incredible. She's taking back control." Mr. Thompson had moved onto the porch. Phone recording in hand, Mrs. Patterson murmured, "I've never seen anything like this. She's making them face it." The first measurable consequence hit my dad at exactly 4:38 p.m. He tried to interject, We can fix this." But my grandma held up a single finger, silent, authoritative, commanding respect without raising her voice. I could feel the tension in the air, thick as honey. Every document she had prepared, the $312,458.72 of verified contributions, receipts, volunteer logs, notarized statements, all now serve as an unassailable shield and sword against her arrogance. My mom's arms fell to her side. She looked down, whispering, we were wrong. But it was more than words now. It was acknowledgement of immediate justice. The witnesses outside began to move closer, some filming, some shouting supportive comments. Yes, stand up for yourself. Finally, someone is showing them. Grandma began to calmly organize the room, her movements deliberate, precise, like a conductor restoring order to a chaotic symphony. The wheelchair, once a symbol of vulnerability, now became a podium of authority. As she positioned herself with dignity and control, I could see the first visible humiliation on my parents' faces. My dad's shoulders slumped completely, his usual arrogance replaced by disbelief and silent acknowledgement. My mom's lips trembled as she mumbled apologies no longer ignored, but received in the core community. In truth, at 4:45 p.m., Grandma handed my parents copies of notarized statements from neighbors, friends, and local officials documenting her contributions over 50 years, every page a dagger of undeniable evidence. These are the facts. Your actions today will be remembered and weighed accordingly, she said softly, but with a piercing clarity. The room, the air, the faint creak of the floorboards all resonated with the reversal of power. Witnesses outside began whispering excitedly, "Look at her. She's unstoppable." Little Tommy across the street jumped slightly, as if witnessing a superhero, reclaiming her world. Mrs. Patterson, filming on her phone, whispered, "This will go viral on the neighborhood page. Everyone needs to see this." The subtle but immediate justice manifested not in anger or violence, but through calm, precise assertion of truth and authority. My dad tried to mutter again, but the words faltered. My grandma's gaze alone silenced him. At exactly 4:52 p.m., the first public humiliation occurred. My dad, usually the figure of dominance, now stood meekly while the witnesses outside, neighbors filming, whispered commentary and supportive murmurs documented. Every second the reversal was public, immediate, and undeniable. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, lemon polish, and faint summer humidity, but the oppressive tension had shifted to charged triumph. Grandma's calm demeanor, combined with years of preparation, had restored dignity and forced acknowledgement. The first steps towards systemic accountability had begun. The house, witnesses, and community were all silently recording, storing, and validating the justice unfolding before them. My mom finally said aloud, We will never ignore your efforts." Again, and the words carried across the room like the first official measure of justice. My grandma nodded slightly, the faintest smile appearing at 4:57 p.m. She had reclaimed not just her home, but respect and recognition in real time. The witnesses outside applauded quietly, some recording, some shouting justice at last. Every detail, every document, every gesture contributed to the immediate rebalancing of power. If the story moved you, share it now, because what follows next will show the full impact of this justice and the ripple effect on everyone involved. You won't want to miss it. By 5:21 p.m. on April 14th, 2022, the house on 14th Street in Savannah had completely shifted from a site of humiliation to one of undeniable impact. Grandma's presence, calm and commanding, filled the room with authority. No one dared challenge the faint smell of antiseptic from her hospital stay, combined with lemon polish and polished hardwood floors, carried an almost ceremonial tone of triumph outside the house. Neighbors gathered, phones raised, recording every moment Mrs. Patterson leaned over the fence, whispering, "This is incredible. Look at her. She's reclaiming everything." Mr. Thompson nodded solemnly, murmuring, "I've never seen someone orchestrate justice." So, quietly yet so completely, little Tommy from across the street bounced excitedly, whispering, "She's amazing." The $312,458.72 in verified contributions, the receipts, notarized statements, volunteer logs, everything meticulously organized and presented, had created an unassailable record of Grandma's authority and investment. My dad's face, usually the picture of arrogance, was now pale and slack, his shoulders hunched, his usual dominance completely stripped away. My mom, trembling slightly, whispered, We understand now. We were blind, but the acknowledgement went further than words. The impact was measurable and immediate. The witnesses outside now numbered over 20, many streaming live, some calling friends come see the historic reversal unfold. Grandma, wheelchair position like a throne, hands resting lightly on the armrests, eyes scanning the room, spoke softly but with piercing clarity. Every contribution, every hour, every effort I've put into this house is value. Respect and acknowledgement are not optional. The room seemed to absorb the weight of her words, the faint creak of the floorboards under her chair, the subtle hum of the ceiling fan, the warm light of the late afternoon sun, all emphasizing the moment of complete transformation. My dad tried to protest again, stammering, we can, but his voice was weak, halted by the sheer force of truth and evidence laid bare in front of witnesses. Every page, every dollar, every notarized statement became a sort of undeniable authority. The neighbors outside whispered and applauded quietly. She's proven him wrong. Look at her. Unbelievable. The ripple effect extended beyond our house. The social media posts and the live streams were shared rapidly across Savannah. People commenting, sharing, supporting the reclamation of dignity and power. The public humiliation of my parents, subtle yet complete, was evident in their subdued posture, their pale faces, their quiet murmurs of acknowledgement. My Grandma's power, once hidden, had become visible and unchallengeable. The house felt lighter, charged with triumph and recognition. Every detail, from the antiseptic smell to the polished floors to the faint breeze through the lace curtains, resonating with justice. The immediate consequences were not just personal, but systemic. The recognition of her rightful contributions, her dignity, and authority began to inspire neighbors and witnesses alike to reevaluate respect, care, and acknowledgement in their own homes and communities. By 5:32 p.m., the balance of power had completely shifted, and my parents' previous dominance had been replaced with cautious respect. Grandma's calm, meticulous, and unwavering assertion of authority had restored not just her dignity, but also established a new precedent of accountability and fairness. Witnesses outside, now over 30, were nodding, murmuring, recording, sharing, and validating every second of justice unfolding. If the story moved you, share it now, because the final chapter will show the ultimate transformation and reflection that will inspire and resonate long after the day ends. By 6:05 p.m. on April 14th, 2022, the house on 14th Street in Savannah had transformed into more than just a home. It had become a symbol of resilience, dignity, and undeniable truth. The faint scent of lemon polish and antiseptic lingered in the air, mingling with the warmth of the late afternoon sun streaming through lace curtains. Grandma sat in her wheelchair, hands resting lightly on the armrest, but eyes alert and radiant, her posture calm and commanding. She had reclaimed not just her home, but her authority and dignity. The neighbors outside, phones raised and streaming, whispered in awe, "This is incredible. She's unstoppable." Mr. Thompson shook his head, murmuring, "I've never seen someone turn humiliation into such clear power." Little Tommy, peeking from behind the oak tree, whispered, "She's a hero." I stood beside Grandma, my chest swelling with pride and awe, realizing transformation wasn't just hers. It was ours. The house felt alive. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of sunlight, a reminder of the moment when injustice had been overturned. My dad and mom, subdued and reflective, now fully aware of the impact of their arrogance, had begun the slow process of acknowledgement. My mom whispered softly, we understand now." And the words were sincere. My dad, face pale but calm, nodded, "We underestimated you. We were wrong. The immediate effect of justice had extended beyond personal reconciliation. It had set a precedent for respect, accountability, and acknowledgement of contributions long ignored Grandma's power. Once subtle, now radiated openly without arrogance or cruelty. Her decades of preparation, meticulous documentation, and quiet persistence had transformed humiliation into triumph and inspired everyone watching. The witnesses outside numbered over 50, many. Filming, sharing, commenting, and celebrating the restoration of dignity. Each whisper, each recorded frame added to a collective acknowledgement that injustice can be overturned through calm, deliberate action, and unwavering self-respect. A faint hum of the ceiling fan above the polished hardwood floors seemed almost celebratory. The late afternoon sunlight warming every corner of the house, as if the walls themselves recognized the transformation. I realized something vital. True empowerment doesn't come from anger or revenge. It comes from clarity, preparation, and moral authority. Grandma's calm, yet unyielding demeanor had inspired courage in me and in the community, witnessing her reclaim what was always hers. Every detail, from the antiseptic and lemon polish lingering in the air to the subtle squeak of the wheelchair wheels to the soft murmurs of the neighbors outside, had become part of a living testament to resilience and justice. I whispered to Grandma softly, "You've taught me more than words can say." She smiled faintly, eyes twinkling. "And now you'll carry it forward." The lesson was universal. Anyone watching could see that respect and acknowledgement must be earned, given, and defended, and that dignity cannot be taken without consequence. If you've ever felt powerless in the face of injustice, remember that preparation, clarity, and calm courage can turn the tide. Stand up for yourself and your loved ones. Never underestimate the quiet power of persistence and integrity. And now, as we close this chapter, I want you to engage with this story. Share it with someone who needs to see it. Comment below your thoughts and experiences. Subscribe to witness more journeys of resilience and empowerment. And hit the notification bell to never miss a story that restores faith in justice. Grandma's story is more than one afternoon. It's a blueprint for reclaiming dignity and asserting rightful authority in the face of injustice. Let her calm, precise, and unwavering strength inspire you, teach you, and remind you that no one can take away what is rightfully yours. If you remember one thing from a day, let it be this: patience, preparation, and moral courage will always prevail in the end.